Yes.
Nice. Get it, Wesley.
Yes. Beautifully done. Beautifully done. Good afternoon, good morning, all, or good evening, depending upon where you're at. Welcome to Triumph. This is Sunday, February the 20th, the third Sunday in February. The month is just moving along. And we are here at Triumph, and we're still celebrating Black History Month all month long. So we welcome you here to this space on this morning. It's so good to see everyone in the Zoom room. As you're coming in, our team is here. So good to see you. And Wes opened us up as always with such beautiful music. And those of you that are coming on that will be joining us, those that are joining us via social media, so good to have you here. We just welcome you all to this space. And we're going to get right into it because we have so much that we want to share today. Our theme today is Against All Odds, Living, Loving, Laughing, Lifting. And our focus is going to be on really looking at the vibrant spirit of our ancestors historically, at the struggles that they've come through, but how they've been able to continue to rise, continue to thrive, continue to find joy, continue to lift each other and themselves. And so we're going to be looking at that on today. We are setting this atmosphere today in the midst of what seems to be looming another war on the global scene. And we don't take that lightly, and neither do we want to just overlook that notion that we are potentially, our nation, once again being engaged in what may be another war. We want to just keep that in mind as we're moving through today, as we lift up a positive energy and vibration to usher in a time of peace, a time of community, a time of communication and understanding and resolve, knowing and fully believing that at the vibration of love, at the vibration of peace, at this vibration, we can begin to lift, raise the consciousness, even of our global leaders, so that we do not have to suffer what may be this impending threat. We also want to be mindful that we're still in the pandemic, although many are behaving as if we're out of it. And from an idealistic perspective, yes, I can go with that. We all want to be out of this. We want to be whole and back to what we thought of as normal again. But we also want to be sensitive to those who are still struggling through this with illness, with isolation, with the loss of loved ones, with the sickness of loved ones, and caring for themselves and others. So we keep all of that, as we come to this table of celebration, that is not lost on us. So we just want to be mindful of that. We're idealists, but we do not forget what's happening in the world around us. So having said that, we're going to jump right into it. Our scripture is going to be from given to us read for us by Brother William Moore. Following the scripture, we're going to ground ourselves in a meditation that's going to be offered by Brenda. Before we do the scripture, I just want to share the quote, which again, I want to lay for the platform for us. Brenda, if you could just go back, our quote for today is from Zora Neale Hurston, and it's, "Once you wake up thought in a man, you can never put it to sleep again." Once you wake up thought in a man, you can never put it to sleep again. That's what we try to do here. Awaken thought, awaken us to ourselves and to others. Thank you. So we'll go now to our scripture.
But watch out. Be careful never to forget what you yourself have seen. Do not let these memories escape from your mind as long as you live. And be sure to pass them on to your children and grandchildren.
Ashe. We're going to talk a little bit more about this scripture as we go through our gathering today.
All right. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I have my singing bowl with me. And as we begin, as we open, I'll strike it and I invite you to start focusing on breath. Nice breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just notice any changes you feel as you take those breaths. And as you continuously breathe, I encourage you to try to extend your exhale as much as possible. So in through the nose, and when you exhale, try to make it even longer than the last exhale. And that's a way to start to slow down, start to regulate, and offer your body a chance to just be present, to just be. In whatever mood, whatever state of mind you are in, you are welcome to just be. As you continue breathing, I want to share with you a quote to consider. It's from a book called Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. And this book is essentially a message to communities and individuals that have experienced or are experiencing oppression, and reminding them that there is higher power, that they are not forgotten. It's a reminder of each individual's divinity, and as a community, our strength. He says, of course, God cares for the grass of the field, which lives a day and is no more, or the sparrow that falls unnoticed by the wayside. He also holds the stars in their appointed places, leaves his mark in every living thing, and he cares for me. To be assured of this becomes the answer to the threat of violence, yea, to violence itself. To the degree to which man knows this, he is unconquerable from within and without. Just another reminder. We are divine, and we are beautiful and perfect in every way. I invite you to continue breathing, and I want to sing just a little bit for you. Again, as I sing, just keep this cyclical breath going in and out, and trying to keep the mind focused on that breath. I release control and surrender to the flow of love that will heal me. I release control and surrender to the flow of love that will heal me. I release control and surrender to the flow of love that will heal me. I release control and surrender to the flow of love that will heal me. Some final breaths together. Bring yourself back to our community. And on the last one, let out a nice big sigh. We are divine in every way, and we must always be reminded of that. And I'm always here to remind you of that. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Brenda. Yes.
Triumph's 7 life affirming principles, spaces of union. We affirm that life is in the breath and breath is life. Therefore, we join together to promote our shared humanity and inseparable breath. We affirm that we are born whole, complete as perfect manifestations of the universal mind. We affirm our physical bodies differ, and as such may present different challenges, limitations, or privileges that everyone may not share in. Therefore, we join together to share our strengths and support one another where there may be weaknesses so that we all may enjoy the fullness of life. We affirm that our agreement is to pursue peace, walk in truth, uphold justice tempered with mercy. We affirm that we are like branches on a tree. Although we may grow in different directions, we share a common root, and as such, we pledge to respect each person's path, even as it may differ from one's own. We agree to walk in agreement that it is all right to disagree, and we protect and safeguard this right in so much as the state of disagreement upholds an affirmation of life. We affirm that community building is the process of communal shared principles, shared resources, as well as equitable access to resources. Therefore, we commit to being agents of an open culture that welcomes everyone to participate in the life of the community with the provision that we also hold each other accountable for acts that do not support the life-affirming principles of our awareness, while equally looking for and enacting a commitment to forgive and restore in the spirit of humility and love. Lastly, we affirm the earth and all that dwell therein are manifestations held within the universal mind, and humanity's role is to be faithful stewards of this earth by demonstrating respect and dignity for all beings, the sacredness of Mother Earth, and our commitment to caring for her as we care for ourselves.
Ashe. Thank you, Nadia.
Ashe.
Our opening prayer is going to be offered by Minister Obina Jason at our Nigerian Commission.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
This is open prayer. Unity and to your clear the way in Lakota. Prize God. With a new way of being church. From the cafe of culture to creative witnesses. From the smallness of horizon to the brightness of your vision. You will not your people. I will call others to freedom, to new faith. Clear the way not simple. I will call others to fullest clarity. From fear to faithfulness, order to mercy, from a desire to control to purpose, from refusal to love to readiness to risk. Clear the way in us, your people, that we may all know the beauty, power, and danger of the gospel.
Ashe. Ashe. Thank you.
So a little bit about us. We seek to further the work of Triumph's founder, Bishop Elias Dempsey Smith, who taught life-affirming spiritual principles. Our vision is of an interdependent community where all may share in the fullness of life. Our mission is to promote the creation of new cultural practices and social and economic systems that are egalitarian, affirms our shared humanity, and holds sacred the earth and all life forms. To create a safe and sacred space where marginalized communities can expand both their spiritual and intellectual life and gain access through shared resources, and to honor the Sabbath as a time for individual and collective spiritual, physical, emotional, and mental well-being through shared music, spoken word, sacred readings, and a communal meal. Triumph Life Center's goal is to be a hub for engaging conversations, creative arts expressions, expanding reverence and care for the earth and all life forms, forming alliances and building bridges across community barriers that mutually affirm our shared humanity, where people of all faiths, cultures, ethnicities, races, genders, orientations, abilities, personal challenges, etc., are in community with each other on one accord.
Thank you, Brenda. That's who we are. Thank you. And again, welcome. Everyone has joined us in the Zoom room. It's so good to see you here. We welcome you to this space on today, and to those who are joining us via social media, welcome. We will now going to have our first Black History moment, which Nadia is going to introduce to us, and it grounds our sacred readings for today. So go ahead, Nadia.
A Black History Moment, James Mercer Langston Hughes, February 1, 1902 to May 22, 1967. James Mercer Langston Hughes, born in Joplin, Missouri, is remembered as one of the greatest contributors to the artistic realm of the Harlem Renaissance. Through his exquisite literary compositions, he told stories of the sufferings and the life of the Black people. During the 1920s, when writers chose to stream their content, making their compositions worthy of only the highly literate, Hughes' writings came as an elementary relief to those who could just about read and didn't possess opulent knowledge. His poetry was straightforward and often meant for the Black community. He had a particular penchant for jazz music. In fact, he created a brand new genre of American poetry that was later called jazz poetry. Gaining support for his work, he went on to write short stories, plays, and columns. It was his dauntless ability to express the Black life with all its honesty that won him plenty of admiration later in his career. The columns he wrote largely uplifted the morale of the Blacks who were subjugated to racism. His famous work, When Harlem Was in Vogue, received plaudits from sundry writers. And we will be sharing some of Hugh's poems later.
Thank you, Nadia. So as we are prepared to go into our sacred readings, I think we still need two readers, if there are two volunteers for reading number 2. And if someone would like to read number 5, that's the one I usually end with. But if someone would like to read, we would like to give you the opportunity. So reading number 2, and it will show on the screen. So I think Reverend John has offered to read number 1. I'm just checking as you're okay. So Brenda's reading 1. If Reverend John, if you would read number 2, number 5, and Reverend Audrey, if you would read number 2. Thank you so much. So Brenda's going to read number 1. Reverend Audrey is going to read number 2. Nadia is going to read number 3. Our brother William is going to read number 4, and Reverend John is going to read number 5.
Thank you.
And yes.
So as we go through, just focus, notice what stands out, or if you feel anything within, because we'll have a brief reflection after. So I guess, Wesley, you could start us off with some jams. Mother to Son by Langston Hughes. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I've been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn your back. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it's kinder hard. Don't you fall now, for I still going, honey. I still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. You just need to unmute, Audrey.
Good idea. So, and then run. Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Langston Hughes.
Reverend Audrey, that was beautiful. Could I just ask you to do it again because you were muted for part of it?
Was okay. So everyone
And I think it may be just, yeah, we hear you. I think there's, your Wi-Fi is going in and out. I think it may be her Wi-Fi. We can move on. Yeah, I think it's your
Okay, so-
Wi-Fi. Mm.
Okay, all right.
Brenda, I'll read the one that Reverend Audrey was trying to, if you just go back. Harlem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?
Dreams by Langston Hughes. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow.
I Too by Langston Hughes. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Besides, they will see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. By Langston Hughes.
Still Here by Langston Hughes. I've been scared, I've been scarred and battered. My hopes, wait a minute, I have to shrink the window. Okay, I'm Still Here by Langston Hughes. I've been scarred and battered. My hopes the wind done scattered. Snow has frizzed me, sun has baked me. Looked like between them I'm done. Tried to make me stop laughing, stop loving, stop living, but I don't care. I'm still here. Langston Hughes.
Wow, that was awesome, everyone. Thank you. That was beautiful. And Reverend Audrey, I think was just a connection was going in and out with yours, but thank you for offering to read. That was beautiful.
I agree. Thanks for compiling it all. In this moment, we'll take some time to reflect back on what we've just read and heard together. these writings by Langston Hughes. There's 4 of them. So I ask you first, what are any initial responses? Are there any that stood out to you? Did you experience any sort of triggering thought or emotion that came up as you heard or as you read?
Well, as you open up the reflections, I just want to again repeat what our theme is for today, which is against all odds, living, loving, laughing, lifting. And the poetry was all selected because it's from the Renaissance period, which we're going to focus on, but also it highlights, each of them highlight a part of that theme.
Who would like to speak first? You're welcome to unmute.
I'll speak. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I went off video, so maybe it'll be helpful. First, I'm just grateful. Langston Hughes has been a major part of my life. I was trying to remember the first time that I recited Life for Me. Ain't Been No Crystal Staircase, probably 25, 30 years ago. But no one can read any of the words, I believe, of any of these poems and not feel the power, the soulfulness of it, the painfulness of it, the hopefulness of it. What happens to a dream deferred? Of course, I was trying to think of the movie that it's a part of. But the entire theme resonates so deeply with all of us who have a history of being people of color in America. I was at a meeting yesterday, and as we sat around the table in Ojai, the importance of honoring the past, but moving forward was repeated over and over again. And that, I think we hear that in the poems still here. The transition of the energy from the first poem to the last poem is that telling of the story, acknowledging of the story, which is so very important if we are to move forward, and then the willingness and the commitment to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Willingness and commitment to move forward. Would anyone else like to share any responses, anything, any memories it has brought back for you, or anything new you might have experienced as you've heard it again?
Hi, Brenda, this is Bandely.
Hi.
Hi, it was just one, well, they all are awesome, but in Dream Deferred, there was one line that resonated with myself and where I'm at now in my life. Hold on to your dreams, because when dreams go, life is a broken wheel frozen in snow.
Mhm.
That just spoke volumes. And I think it connects to my age, transition of time and dreams. You just don't let go of them. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I noticed this tone of defiance, I suppose, like in regards to really recognizing and acknowledging the circumstances, the conditions that the writer is experiencing, but even still being hopeful, and a lot of mention of dreams, right? Or being positive towards the future. So I kind of appreciate, I don't know if that's a contrast, but those two different emotions or yes, tones that are present in this beautiful poetry.
Believe it or not, I hadn't heard these until I was in graduate school and seminary, where I took a class where it was on all the Harlem Renaissance writers. That's after how many years of school, 14 or 15 years of school, you know. And Langston Hughes was one of the favorite ones. And I remember going to a place in Manchester, New Hampshire, where they were playing jazz and doing Langston Hughes readings, playing the saxophone with it. And the one about life ain't been no crystal stair. That's how my life has been, actually. It's sort of like if you're in a place and you really want to reach for those dreams, the stairs are not going to be easy. You can do whatever they tell you you're supposed to do. You can be the best and top of your class, and there are still going to be impediments put in your way.
Mhm.
And you just have to keep going and going and going, because if you stop, you just become bitter and you're done for. So that's what I keep thinking of whenever I hear that poem. And it helps me keep going forward.
Man.
Would anyone else like to share before we move on? Bum, bum, bum. Okay.
I would like to comment about what happens to dream deferred. This really resonated with me. And first question, the writer responded by himself when he said that, or he asked, does it dry up? Well, I think it depends on how long you defer it. A dream. Sometimes it can be completely forgotten. Sometimes, during forgetfulness, it can be revived. And I like the way he concluded, or that it fester off. And I was just thinking about it, and I think that was a very good question. Does it dry up?
Mhm.
It depends on the individual and so many circumstances.
Mhm.
I would say, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe even depending on the content of the dream, it might react differently as time goes on.
Exactly.
And kind of what you mentioned, it might be re-nourished or revitalized
Exactly. I
or
love
used for
that.
something different. You can eat a raisin and nourish yourself.
Mhm. Repurpose it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining in with that. That was really cool. Next, we will have Sister Beverly sharing some beautiful vocal performance with us.
Let's just welcome her.
You just
I
need to
forget-
unmute.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. All my heart to him I give, ever to him I cling. In his blessed presence live, ever his praises sing. Love so mighty and so true, bears my soul's best songs. Faithful, loving service to him belong. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. God gave his son, God gave his son, when nothing else could help. God gave his son, God gave his son, God gave his son, when nothing else could help. God gave his son, son gave his life, son gave his life, when nothing else could help. Son gave his life, son gave his life, son gave his life, when nothing else could help. Son gave his life. Excuse me. He brought redemption down. He brought redemption down, when nothing nothing else could help. He brought redemption down. He brought redemption down. He brought redemption down. When nothing else could help, he brought redemption down. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. It's always such a blessing when you share your gift with us. And thank you for just being here with us in the Zoom room. I think now we're going to have our next Black History moment from William Moore, who's going to introduce to us, talk to us a little bit about the Harlem Renaissance. I just want to again acknowledge what our theme is today. So as we're moving through, we're all continue to be aware of how and why we're doing what we're doing. Still in celebration of Black History Month, but the theme is against all odds, living, loving, laughing, and lifting. Go ahead, Brother Moore.
As we continue to celebrate Black History Month, my topic this morning is the Harlem Renaissance, also known as New Age Movement. Renaissance in French means rebirth. It was a time for the revival of classical learning and wisdom that started in France and other European countries in the 14th and 16th centuries. The Harlem Renaissance, however, was an intellectual and cultural revival of African American music, dance, art, fashion, theater, and politics that was centered in Harlem, in New York City, spanning in the 1920s and the 1930s, and influenced by Paris in France. This new development gave Harlem, and Harlem became a cultural mecca, an explosion of social and artistic developments, a period that was considered to be the golden age in African American culture. There emerged prominent figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, Charles Spurgeon, Marcus Garvey, and many, many others. Also prolific Black writers such as Zora Neale Hurston aggressively advertised through the NAACP magazine. They expanded cultural dancing, theaters, and others so that white folks and others around the globe came to Harlem to take advantage of the culture and a very vibrant nightlife. Jazz, tap dancing, elaborate floor shows, paintings, photography, musicians with their music, and others all participated in the new awakening in Harlem. As one of the most famous Harlem Renaissance writers, Zora Neale Hurston, once said, "I am not tragically colored. There is no great sorrow dammed up in my soul, nor lurking behind my eyes. No, I do not weep at the well. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife." Now, this was a very great woman who embraced her culture and sought to empower other African American candidates. The Harlem Renaissance brought Black pride and an enormous impact on Black consciousness worldwide. Harlem attracted remarkable concentration of intellect and talent and served as the symbolic capital of this great cultural awakening. It was instrumental for many positive social changes in Black neighborhoods everywhere in America, and it helped set the stage for the civil rights movements. The end of this cultural boom began with the stock market crash in 1929, followed by the Great Depression. To make matters worse, the Harlem race riot of 1935 broke out following the arrest of a young shoplifter, resulting in 3 dead, hundreds injured, and millions of dollars in property damage. The riot was a death knell for the Harlem Renaissance. thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brother William. And that actually, your presentation sets the tone for my short presentation. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible because I want Reverend James to be able to come and lead a discussion through some of the questions that we have shared about it. So Brother William introduced us to the Harlem Renaissance. And what I would like to do is to set a context for what was happening in the country at that time during the Harlem Renaissance, so that we can have a fuller view of our theme, against all odds, living, loving, laughing, and lifting. Our scripture that we began with today from Deuteronomy 4:9 talks about the importance of remembering and sharing the history from generation to generation. And thank you, Audrey, for underscoring that when you spoke, that history is not just what we hear about in books once a year or when we're in school, but the pronouncement or commandment to the Hebrew people in the book of Deuteronomy was that they would repeatedly and constantly retell the story of their oppression and their liberation from generation to generation to generation. And often our experience here in the Americas is that the history of oppressed people, be they indigenous, be they African Americans, be they Latinx, is not told because if it's told by others that have written that history and not from within the community. So just briefly, that Harlem Renaissance, that period of time that Brother William spoke about, was also the same period of time when there was the Great Migration. And the Great Migration was, for those that may not know, was that period of time when a significant number of African Americans migrated from the South to the North, to the Northeast, to the Midwest, to the Western part of the United States. So from 1910 up until 1970, historians tell us that there was about 6 million Black folks who migrated out of the South, escaping the oppression that, or that they were still facing even after the slavery ended and the 13th Amendment was passed. There was a shorter period between 1910 and 1940, which some historians call the first Great Migration, when about 2 million people migrated upwards, north, south, mid United States. Part of that migration, as I said, it was due to after the end of Reconstruction, which was that time after slavery ended, when we saw Black people in their resiliency with nothing, becoming tremendous entrepreneurs, holding elected offices, opening banks, every walk and endeavor of life, we see Black people beginning to thrive immediately after the end of slavery in this country. The backlash to that was the Jim Crow laws that came in to push Black people into another form of legal servitude and slavery. So for those that don't know, Jim Crow are those laws that were enacted in various states that in essence, that lasted for about 100 years, that in essence were restrictive, not only put in place segregation, but it put in place all sorts of restrictive codes and laws and policies from the government that limited Black people's access to vote, their mobility, their ability to work, their ability to own property, and their ability to even be free of incarceration, to live free in their homes with their families. So I want to just talk briefly about one particular law that we may not be familiar with. As we're retelling this history, why do we retell it? Because if we do not know our history, it's been said we're doomed to repeat it. And in the current context of our country, we need to be mindful of what's the conversation around current policy and current laws. And are they just a repetition of what was in place 100 years ago, repackaged, re-wrapped, that were really in place to, again, restrict minority communities? So I want to talk, just share with you what racially restricted covenants were. And I don't know if anyone here are familiar with it, but just briefly, a covenant is a legally enforceable contract that's imposed in a deed upon the buyer of property. I don't know if Reverend Beverly, who is very familiar with real estate, has heard of this, but it has to do with the deed and how deeds are written and how they can be conveyed and how ownership can be passed. So the racially restrictive covenants refer to contractual agreements that prohibited the purchase, lease, or occupation of a piece of property by a particular group of people, usually African Americans. Racially restricted covenants were not only mutual agreements between property owners in a neighborhood not to sell to certain people, but also agreements that were enforced through the cooperation of real estate boards, neighborhoods associations, and they became common after 1926 when the US Supreme Court decision, Corrigan v. Butler, validated their use. The United States Supreme Court said racially restricted covenants were legal and they could be used in states to prohibit the sale of property from one owner to another if that person was of African American descent. So I want to just share here that these covenants, which were enforced by the government, forced by local law enforcement, and also became policy of what we know now to be, and Reverend Beverly would be more familiar with this, the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, which we may know it by that, and the Veterans Administration, the VA, which both historically have, the FHA has insured mortgages to primarily everyone that buys a mortgage, unless you are wealthy or well off and can put a substantial amount of down payment to purchase a house. That house is insured by the FHA. Likewise, the VA for veterans guaranteed certain loans to them because of their service to this country. However, the FHA, which is established in 1934, the VA in 1921, the FHA by policy prohibited and would not permit developers to sell properties to Blacks if they were in integrated communities. And even when they were not, most often the FHA refused to insure those mortgages to folks, Blacks, even if they had like income, et cetera, as their non-Black counterparts. What's also very, very alarming is that the Veterans Administration, which was based on service to this country, routinely refused to give Black veterans the same privilege that they afforded to, or rights that they afforded to non-Black veterans. So I want to just tell you a brief story about a gentleman named Frank Stevenson, who was born in Louisiana. And I've been doing some research here lately on Louisiana because that's where my mom's family, my mom was born. But Frank Stevenson was born in Louisiana in the 1920s. Louisiana was an agricultural community. And there were laws that were passed to create a equitable wage amongst workers. However, because of discrimination that still existed, those who were cotton pickers, which was one of the dominant industries in Louisiana, the Black workers were made significantly less than the white workers. So a lot of them, that migration that I talked about was because they could not afford to live under the kind of economic oppression that they were experiencing. So they began to migrate. Frank Stevenson's family migrated west to California and settled in the Bay Area. He got a job at Ford and was a member of the UAW, United Auto Workers Union. He came in at an entry-level position and where most Blacks were given jobs. So he made less wages than his white counterparts. But eventually in a few years, because of his tenacity, his adaptability, he was able to watch and observe and learn how to do multiple jobs in the Ford plant, which earned him a promotion. And pretty soon he was making as much as his white counterparts. There came a point when Ford Company moved its plant about 100 miles away. What they did was they contracted with developers to build housing because the union had negotiated that all those employees of the company would be given opportunity to work at the new plant. So Ford negotiated with developers to build housing for its workers so they could relocate. However, the issue that came into play was that although Frank Stevenson made the same money as his counterparts, had been with Ford for a number of years, the FHA, the federal government, and local banks, one of them being Bank of America, would not guarantee or mortgage to the Black workers at Ford, only because they were Black, not because they didn't have the income, not because they didn't have stable longevity with the company, but they would not mortgage that developers, guarantee those loans to a developer who developed for an integrated community. Years of battle went back and forth with this. And eventually, many of the Blacks that had relocated were pushed into the subdivisions that some of them were cardboard box housing, some of them were multiple families living in a small dwelling that could not accommodate them. So they had substandard housing because they were not allowed access to the housing that was built. What Frank Stevenson did, and this points back to our theme for today, is that rather than just give up and live in the squire, which he could have, but he had a wife, he had a family. What he did, he got a few other workers, about 10 of them. They pooled their money together and they purchased a large enough vehicle, a van size, so that they could share the expenses and travel the distance, which was in excess of an hour each way to go to work, to travel to work. They did this for 20 years. For 20 years, they worked together and passed by the housing that should have been available to them, but they continued to labor and work and support each other. In 1968, the Housing and Urban Development Act was passed and signed into law by President Johnson right after Martin Luther King passed, and he had worked very hard for this legislation. Frank Stevenson finally was able to get a mortgage and purchased his home of choice in 1970. I'm going to end it there because I do want us to be able to just ask questions to understand what this is and then open up the discussion. And James, I think you have the list of questions. It should be on the outline. But if anyone has a question about what is the covenant, what are you talking about? What does this have to do with anything? Open that up first before James go through the other questions. And Brenda, you could put those back up on the screen.
I'd just like to make a brief comment. I would like to make a brief comment.
Yes, I'm just trying to get James to come in because he's facilitating a discussion. I don't see him.
Okay.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
So I don't know if anyone else saw the advertising a couple of days ago for the documentary on President Lincoln that's done by Two Black Documentary. And what you're talking about, Reverend Sandra, reminds me of this documentary. I suggest everyone try and watch it. I know our father always said that Abraham Lincoln really didn't like Black people. He wanted to keep the Union together. And what struck me as I listened to them the other day is they talked about the evolution of consciousness of Abraham Lincoln that was inspired or challenged by Frederick Douglass, which is something I did not know. But one of the most important things that I did not know that I think is relevant is after slavery ended, white people were talking about where are we going to send these people. White people never intended for Black people to stay in America. And I didn't know that. This was brand new to me. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. So Reverend James, what we want to do is just get reactions, questions, comments on the presentation that I gave. And then there's a list of questions that you can get through, whichever ones that you think relevant.
Sure. Well, I mean, Audrey responded with talk about Abraham Lincoln and his perhaps his social consciousness that had been influenced. Sandra has shared about the impact of Jim Crow laws. This is a big hot button topic now, I would think. I mean, just recently yeah, well, that's a kind of police issue. I don't want to go the police route. That's gonna that's gonna derail where we're going. But I'm gonna start with one of the questions. What are some of the tools? I'm gonna start with the number 4. Is the struggle over? And just get right to the core of the matter, and invite everyone to really think about the combination of those last 2 questions. Is the struggle over, and what is the struggle now? Because the struggle now is not the same, right? I mean, if we're honest, right? People are not regularly getting lynched and it's reported in the newspaper, right? So that's not part of our lived experience now in 2022. But what is the struggle? And if there is one, and is it over? And I would suggest that if there was a ping of pain when that was said, that the struggle's not over for you. And I would suggest that if there was no ping of pain, the lack of recognition that there is a ping of pain is part of the discussion in the situation. So I'll leave it at there for someone else to come in and speak.
So I think Bandley was open first, then I see Reverend Beverly.
James, I don't think we see actual lynchings today. The sad part is some of the things we don't know that could actually be death today. I lived in my lifetime where all those boys in Atlanta went missing. Why? I still don't know the answer to that. There's a lot of things that happen that we don't know the root cause, but just because we don't see it on television or the news doesn't mean it's not happening right in front of our unseen eyes. The sad part of it is, I think it was a profound writing that we have not arrived at in this country, and I don't think it's just African American. All men are created equal. That's a high standard that this country put on paper to live up to. And until that reality hits that all of us, regardless of, are created, then how do we embrace one another and understanding that we share in common the breath of life to love one another? So yes, the struggle's real. I like the fact that I never heard that story that Reverend Sandra read, that they chose another way. Sometimes the hills in front of us don't mean in that moment we were supposed to climb it. They found a way to go around it. The key is facing the struggle and finding the ways to overcome is the real challenge in life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Reverend Beverly was asking
Yeah.
to speak also. Beverly, you're muted.
That in today's times, today's culture, we do not have the lynchings that took place, 100 years ago. But in my personal opinion, what happened to Trayvon Martin was a lynching. What happened to the young man that they just sentenced, the father and brother, that was a lynching. There were no police involved. These were individual citizens that took it upon themselves to do what they did just because a person was Black. So I think the struggle is definitely not over. I think it needs to be approached in a different way. And I think we have modern day lynching. Because lynching is when someone shoots and kills someone for no reason other than race. And that to me is still happening today, be it the hands of a police person or the hands of a citizen just because you're running through his neighborhood. So I think that, the lynchings are still here in our society. It's just done in a different way. And it's nobody with a hood on. The hoods have come off, but it's still happening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. That was well said. And I think it attests to the difficulty in the situation, and that I was having a conversation on some of these issues, and I'm personally of the opinion that this is a conversation for mature audiences only. That it's not an easy topic, and that the emotions and the facts and the lived experiences of everyone involved is entwined in such a way that I would say, and this is just me talking, that unless we all find a way to rise above, even though I don't like talking about levels, is going to be difficult for this struggle to end. And, I don't say that, I'm saying that with a little bit more, I guess, experience of these things in me, and the interactions with people currently. And, we can talk about empathy as a beginning. We can talk about, trying to create safe spaces. But the volatility that lives inside of, I would almost argue, each of us, regarding what I call the social hierarchy and its order and its implementation, is quite a task to try and to face. And so I'll leave it at that, because Audrey and Beverly.
I'm sorry,
raised their
James.
hands.
Innocent had his hand first, so we want to just get those that
Okay,
haven't had an
sure. I
opportunity.
didn't see Innocent's
Then we'll go
hand.
back to Audrey and Beverly. Innocent, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I chipped in late. I found you guys had started. But anyway, what is happening around us is that the struggle is real and it's happening. Take a case in the country where I am. If you find someone as in using a panga to kill a friend, and then at the end of the day you don't you don't see the reason as to why he's being killed. The guys, the so-called guys in government tell us that they're trying to investigate. At the end of the day, you don't get a report as to why that has happened. So the struggle is on, and that's a fact, and we can't run away from it. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Mm.
I guess Reverend Audrey, then Beverly, and then John.
So, James, after your comments, I feel a little vulnerable and perhaps what I have to say may be considered immature. You said this is for mature audiences only. So my disclaimer is my remarks are immature. And so I feel very strongly that we, especially as Black women, have become addicted to struggle. Songs like I'm climbing up the rough side of the mountain, just trying to make it in. There's an energy around struggle that has consumed the minds and the hearts, not just in the United States. Innocent is part of my group in Uganda, but of people of color. To me, we're at a point where it's time for us. Struggle, to me, is survival. It's time for us to thrive. And how do we do that? I don't remember whether it was Reverend Beverly or Reverend Bandy that said, all men, all people are created equal. And so for me, I would ask the question, what is our work here in America and around the world, but especially in America? I watched the movie Selma, sitting with about 8 white people holding hands and everybody crying. And I saw something that I had never seen before. As Dr. King knelt on the bridge and the jeering crowd threatening him, and he knelt to pray, trying to figure out whether he should go forth or retreat, I focused on that crowd. And I said, how much does one have to hate themselves in order to be here doing this? In the movie 12 Years a Slave, the most frightening person in that movie was not the slave master, but the wife. Until and unless we are able to get some distance within us from the experiences that we have talked about, where we can talk about them, but place them in the context of where are we today? Where are we today? And place value on what we have, the ability to laugh, to dance, to sing, to be happy. These things are not valued, but it's what is within us that the world needs now. So I believe that we need to reinterpret. We need a new language and a new narrative for how we talk about the past. But I hope and pray the struggle is over.
I want to comment quickly on what Audrey said and then move to Beverly. First of all, I don't think that that was an immature statement. I thought it was very mature. I thought you were recognizing where you were, recognizing where people are, recognizing a place to go. You know, the notion of addiction to struggle and and being thankful for the things that we have now. And I think it's all good. And so I just want to say that. So thank you for sharing that. Beverly.
Okay, I want to comment first on what Audrey said, and then I want to raise a question. It is my opinion that in the Christian community, particularly the Black church, we are taught to believe that without struggle, you can't be a true Christian. So I think a part of it is our mental, I call it a spiritual hold on our mentality, because we sing songs like, must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free? But the same Bible says, my Father is rich in houses and land, and he holds the wealth of the world in his hand. And if I'm his child, then why am I struggling? So I think that the struggle was to keep slaves way back in slavery, and then our Black brothers and sisters, and even some other, minorities in check. That's where I see when I see struggle. Is it still here? Yeah. Can we overcome it? Yes. So I want to pose this question, and it's basically because what kind of accountability do the Christian community, particularly the leaders, have with regard to doing something to make a change in light of the scripture, 2 Chronicles 7:14, which says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and seek my face and do a repenting, I will heal your land. So is not the Christian community accountable in some way that there's not enough repentance going on? There's not enough humility going on? Just food to think about.
Reverend Beverly, thank you. I think your comments are well taken, and they're, and I think a lot of people can agree with what is the right response, especially from an organizational standpoint, and how is that response coordinated such that we could see and track real progress. So thank you for that. Om Prakash.
I think that a lot of the things happening today, especially in the US, are just about the same as was happening a long time ago, except the racism and the violence is almost like a virus that changes and mutates. Now they make us all dependent on an economic system so that we can't survive with that. So lynching means if you talk too much, you get a job and you get thrown out on the street and you end up dying. Now, if it wasn't for the cell phones that we have nowadays and social media, they'd still be shooting and lynching Black people in the street. So it's the same thing. Slavery has become the prison system, with 30 or 40% of the Black people working for less than $1 a day. And the segregation now is going to be worse than it was during the time of Jim Crow, because economically, Black people can't afford to move into the neighborhoods, and a lot of banks still won't give Black people loans. And the school system, public school system, is being defunded, so there's lack of education there. So it's almost like the exact same thing, except it's shifted to more of a softer type of psychological and economic attack, I think. And when we look at that system, we have to also think that everything that we learned about that is shaped in that system, or that gets shaped by that system, helps to reinforce that system, because if it doesn't reinforce it, it gets thrown out. And that's the comment I have about the Christianity. A lot of the verses, if you really look at the Greek or the Aramaic or something, there are these very powerful sayings, but the way we've learned them, like even repentance, meaning sort of breaking the change in your mind and expanding your mind. That's what it says means by repentance, but they taught us it meant be sad. And carrying the cross meant crucifixion of the ego or the small self, but they taught us it meant feeling pain and suffering for yourself. So the truth is in there, but it's only going to come by us remembering how this system is and how it's influenced us and everything else, and how it's constantly psychologically trying to attack us. That's the battle nowadays, the psychological attack, I think.
We are out of time. The conversation has been excellent, and thank you, Reverend James, for walking us through this. There's so much more that could be said. We have one more week of Black History Month focus next week, and hopefully we'll be able to just expand a little bit more on some of these things that we talked about today. I did just want to note, Reverend James, because you had mentioned, you had started to say something about policing, and then you said that's a whole nother subject. I think it's important to note that law enforcement in its totality, that's from the courts to prosecutors to police, have participated and been co-conspirators in what the Jim Crow, the legalized apartheid system, and those systems once they were disbanded. We know with Stevenson and other families that have attempted to own homes in communities where they weren't wanted, where mobs assaulted them and the police stood down and did nothing, or actually would arrest the homeowner for disturbing the peace because they charged them with creating this mob scene when they were the victims of the mob, and the courts refused to prosecute. So it's not, as you said, it's not a simple discussion. Hopefully we can pick this up again next week, but we are out of time. We need to segue now to, James, did you have a final thought before we because you were facilitating it, before we go to, then you can segue into the pledge drive and then we'll close out.
Sure. Yeah, it's I would just put forth to everyone here that the issues are much more complicated than you think, much more entwined into everyday life than you may imagine. And that I'm going to go out on the limb and I'm going to say there's some even juju that's involved here that just doesn't allow reason to rise. And I don't go there very often, but it's a very, I mean, it's something I've actually been talking about a lot over the past couple of weeks in my own life, and it's been a struggle to come to stable places of agreement. You'll find agreement and then find that it falls out, and then find places of agreement and then find something else that causes it to fall out. So yeah, so as you can see here at Triumph, we don't always have easy conversations. We're still here talking to each other, and still here as individuals working through our own perhaps struggles with the material, wanting it to be resolved, and I would dare say wanting to have our way in that resolution. But we have the conversation, and we understand the limits of what you can do in an hour and a half, right? But in an hour and a half, you can find some spark of something you didn't feel before, an idea that you hadn't considered, an idea that you needed to reconsider, that you don't know where the impact that small change will go, and or what that small change will do. And that's what we do here at Triumph every week. And that's what your giving supports. So you can give on the website. You can give through Cash App at $, Triumph 2020. You can give through PayPal at triumphchurchpsc@gmail.com. You can send a check or a money order to Triumph Church of the New Age, P.O. Box 2157, Newark, New Jersey 07114. And your donation, again, goes to helping us facilitate these conversations, generate the questions, and other projects that we have in the queue. So I thank you for your participation, where if you're on Facebook or if you're on YouTube, and to tell your friends about what we're doing here, and to participate in the conversation, and to take the questions seriously, in the sense that culture is, I was at a conference a long time ago for project management, and on the big screen was culture is a network of conversations. And of course I was like, okay, that's cool. Can we move on to like some real stuff? And now I understand, and to not underestimate the power of your communication with your friends in your network. And with that, I'll pass it to Wes.
No, we didn't have one now.
It's the announcements to Brenda for announcements.
Okay, well, as you see on the screen, we have our resource guide, which is recently been updated with a lot of literature, which I encourage you to check out. We use it a lot in our discussions. We have our website where you can find all of the information about Triumph, where you could donate, where you could become a member, or you could just learn more about our team. And social media. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify. Check us out. We're really working on a lot of creative content, and it's going to be wonderful to share it with you all in the near future. And as always, we're in a pandemic. Continue to watch yourself, follow your instincts, and care for others as you would care for yourself. I'm happy to read the words.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. We will have just our final thought coming from Reverend John. Then if you would read the words to live by, and we'll have our closing music and closing prayer. Thank you, everyone, for just being with the conversation and for staying with us through this, as James says, this mature conversation for mature folks and those who are willing to acknowledge that I am. This may not sound mature, which we all at some point are in that place. So thank you all.
As final thoughts, we heard poetry and a lot of discussion looking at the power of a people to overcome and attempt to actually destroy them and destroy their humanity. It happens heavily to African Americans, but part of that that process happens to, I think, everybody within this system. We've learned to think of those with power over as being good. And as a result of that, those who are oppressed have been taught that they are bad or they need to strive to better themselves. But there was a song I heard once called Shining Star. Many of you might have heard it, by Earth, Wind and Fire once. It said, you're a shining star, no matter who you are, shining bright to see what you can truly be. And I was in the middle of the ghetto at that time in high school, almost lost. And it was one of the things that reminded me of who I was. And that, I think, is what we're talking about today, who we are. The poetry is about who we are. Speaking about the faith and religion is about who we are. Realizing that power over is not what we need. It is power with and the power of love, which brings forth resurrection. Power over brings forth the death. Power, love brings forth resurrection. And we, by the love that we share and our power, will be the ones who resurrect all of those hopes, the dreams, the blood, the pain and suffering and the death of our ancestors. Even as in every religion, when the God is crucified, the higher power of love, the other part, resurrects that being and brings it back into its fullness. And right now we are called to do that to all of our ancestors. And we have the power to do that as long as we don't buy into this power over system and remember who and what we are.
Ashe. Thank you, Reverend John. Okay, Brenda, you, Wes, and then you'll do our closing prayer.
All right, our words to live by. They're by Lorraine Hansberry, A Raisin in the Sun. They say, it isn't a circle, it is simply a long line, as in geometry, you know, one that reaches into infinity. And because we cannot see the end, we also cannot see how it changes. And it is very odd by those who see the changes, who dream, who will not give up, are called idealists. And those who see only the circle, we call them the realists.
Which one are you? Thank you, everyone. Ashe. Thank you, Wes.
There is a poem by a woman named Nancy Wood who says, hold on to what is good, even if it's just a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if like a tree you must stand alone. Hold on to what you must do, even if you must go far, far away. And hold on to my hand, even if I am far away from you. May we live these words in love and peace and gratitude to the divine spirit and walk in that love from this day forward. Amen. So be it.
Ashe. And that will be our
Ashe.
closing prayer for today. Thank you, Reverend John. Thank you, everyone. Remember to live, love, laugh, and lift. Have a good one. Take care.